Hello, welcome everyone. Today I have a special guest, Daneil Braum, and we're going to be talking about his cemetery dance reissue of his first collection, The Night Marchers. Welcome, Dan. Do you mind introducing yourself a little bit better than I just did?
I'll give it a try. Thanks for the welcome. Great to see you, Jason. It's great to be back on your podcast. Hello to everyone in the comments. Yeah, my name's Daneil Braum. I'm a writer of short stories. I'm hearing a bit of echo right now. Just a little bit of feedback to you, Jason, if you're
Yeah, it's
hearing
gone
that.
now.
Okay. Well, hey everyone. I'm Daneil Braum. I'm an author of short stories. I call them strange tales in the spirit of the author Robert Aikman. I write stories that tend to be explore the tension between psychological and supernatural. So kind of quiet horror, ghostly like stories that you might find in the Twilight Zone. And it's great to be back on Jason's Weird Reads. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you for asking to come on. I always love having you on and talking with you. Rebecca is in the house, Rebecca Rowland, and she said that you're a fascinating conversationalist, and I have to agree.
Oh, thanks everyone. Thanks Rebecca. Hi. So coming from Matt. Hi Rebecca. Hi Josh. Hey Matt. Thanks for coming.
And it's been a while since I've talked to you person to person. We talk every so often on Messenger, but how have things been going since we last talked?
Things are going great. We were just chatting before we came on about the weather, and you asked how the weather was in New York, but my mind is still a bit on New Orleans weather. I just spent a little bit of time down in New Orleans. I went to have some time writing, and I went to see the opening night of the Cure concert tour. So things have been going pretty good.
Awesome. Speaking of the Cure, I want to thank you for you messaged me one day on Messenger, and you're like, "Have you listened to much of the Cure?" And then we talked about the Cure for a while, and
Yeah.
that sent me down a little rabbit hole. I ended
Oh,
up
I'm
listening to a
glad.
bunch of Cure for about 2 weeks straight, and
Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, like I remember it was an interesting reply. Like you, if I'm not mistaken, you said you really liked the album Disintegration, but
yeah,
hadn't had a chance to give them a lot of their catalog a try. And I was like, when I get a situation like that, and it's often with books or music, it's like I was like, oh, I envy you. You have an exciting journey ahead of you.
yeah. It was about 15, 20 years ago. I started listening to Disintegration. I was going through a kind of a rough patch in my life, and that album really helped me through it. And I listened to it past that issue, and I listened to it for
Mm,
about a year. I think I told you I had it in the CD player for about a year.
yeah,
And I did at the time. I did check out some other The Cure stuff, but that album was just like that's where it was for me.
yeah,
And then I moved on to something else.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
but but now it's just like wow. And so I have watched some of The Cure live on like YouTube and whatnot. And you got to see them live. Did you see them live in New Orleans?
I saw them live in New Orleans. Yeah, I'd seen them back in the day. And yeah, so it's great. It's a great nostalgic thing to feel, those good old fashioned vibes. But the thing about for me, The Cure was a band that never went away. They continued to keep making release music that was relevant to me, and they're really in a great place in their career. That they're probably soon to release what they're saying is going to be their last album, and it's really emotionally powerful. And this isn't really such a huge tangent from talking about writing because um, I think I like The Cure for a lot of the same reason I like a lot of what I like in the fiction that I see that's going around. Like one of the major complaints about people with The Cure, it's like, oh, that's so depressing. Oh, that's so dark. And okay, yeah, like The Cure, there is darkness and there is a stoicism to it. But at least for me, I always find that it's there's the light in the darkness that they're not looking away from these dark things. Like I mean, some of the new songs are like the lyrics are like it's all gone, it's all over,
Yeah.
but like
Like
like literally like it's like those are literally the lyrics, but there is a sense of emotionality and comfort and hope in the music that I find and I think fans find, and that's what I like about my fiction. Same thing I like about the Cure's music.
Yeah. Well, I think you were talking about one of their newer songs on that album you just mentioned, End Song.
Yeah,
I, I
that's the
read
one I'm quoting from. Yeah.
I read the lyrics for it, and you can Robert Smith really puts you where he's at right now
Mm,
in his career. And I watched a YouTube video of them playing that live, and Robert Smith, the tears were just rolling out of his eyes.
yeah.
It's
He's
like,
present. He's really look, sometimes people at this stage in their lives or their careers, they're just showing up or doing it for the cash, but and that's okay, but that's not the cure today. Like he's doing it for a reason other than the money, you know.
yeah.
He's
Well,
present.
like you said, with the darkness and the light, there is that light. They have these poppy songs that are just fun, right? Like,
They kill you. They kill you of a set of just they take you to they really show you the darkness, and then they're like, all right, now we're gonna do like 6 poppy songs, and
now we're gonna dance.
now we're gonna yeah, and he does this little Robert Smith dance, and it's like yeah, we'll break your heart, and then we'll put you back together
Yeah. You brushed upon it a little bit, and we may have talked about this before, but I want to know how much does music play a role in your own writing?
You know, that's a question I wanna. My knee jerk answer is to say, "Oh, it doesn't," or I want to say, "No, it doesn't." I'm not one of those writers that listens to music intentionally when I write, but I probably can't say that with a straight face because, like, some music just without me intending it, it just seems to find its way into my stories, and you know, some of the characters are musicians, or um, at one point I counted, yeah, there is a lot of music in the story. So yeah, unintentionally, because it is something that I love and something I think about. That it does. It's one of those things that does sort of sideways find its way into the stories, even if I'm not, which and not sitting down to write a story about music per se. Which I did that once. I did that once. It was from the Wish Mechanics. It was the story An American Ghost in Zurich was supposed to be, it was for an anthology, it was supposed to be about a song, and that was a story inspired by a School of Seven Bells song and a Smashing Pumpkins song. So
Very cool. Um, Now this sort of leads into what we're going to be doing here tonight. Um, Daniel is going to be doing reading excerpts from 3 separate stories from the Night Marchers, and this one sort of brings us to the first one. It's about a band. It's called Music of the Spheres. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the story before you jump in reading?
yeah, yeah, it's called Music of the Spheres, which the title alludes to. I guess the title, The Music of the Spheres, was a I guess this is a theory or a pre-Renaissance worldview about the nature of the world and the nature of the planets, and just sort of the mystical aspects of music that was not really mystical. It was sort of a commonplace thing in the world. And so Music of the Spheres, it's a story that I like to read because, like, I guess if this was a Cure album, might be one of the more accessible stories. I like to read it. I do read it a lot. And it's a story that I wrote before I knew about Robert Aikman. And the book is The Night Marchers and Other Strange Tales. And for me, I like to write strange tales. I like to write stories with an intentional ambiguity in them. Those stories where what I used to call have an openness, or it's not clear intentionally what the characters have experienced and what you, the readers, have seen. So I wrote that. I wrote this one much more on instinct, and it was one of the, and I feel happy about it because I feel like it worked out that way. So so setting up the story, it is a story. Our main character is a young man and his friend, and they're at that point in life, maybe in their 20s, where they're looking for direction, and they think they're trying to find it in music. So it's a story of the relationship between these two young men who are trying to find themselves and find their place in life through music. And Yeah, as happens in New York, strange things happen. Are those strange things emotional or psychological, or are they experiencing something supernatural? And that's the strange tale element of the story. So I'm going to pick it up at the end of the story where one of the characters has disappeared, and the main character is tracking him down to try to find him, and we'll pick it up from there. So this is from Music of the Spheres. He's looking for our main character is looking for his friend Jack, and he thinks he's found him. St. Robinson was a tiny side street right at the base of the meatpacking district, where renovated warehouses, now chic and trendy lounges and eateries, mingled with meat and fish distribution centers. 55 was an old walk-up plastered with faded paper flyers advertising shows and parties with dates long past. I went up the steps and found the front door unlocked and ajar. Then I heard the music. A soprano sax played a whispering refrain, like a bird waking up in the dark of night. You could hear the darkness and the bird singing despite it. Roger. Congas moved the beat beneath, and then I realized dozens of other instruments had joined in, their simple parts together forming a complicated whole. I walked inside. The front room was packed with black music stands and folding tables. Notebooks covered the tables, musical scores, star charts, all annotated in a wild, flowing scroll in a language I did not recognize. The music was louder, more layered, but I couldn't figure out where it was coming from. I cut through the room and into the kitchen. Two construction workers, who looked like they'd just come off work, sat at the table strumming guitars. Their playing was sloppy, but they were intensely focused and didn't bother to look up at me. As I realized their amateur chops somehow fit into the song, the bad feeling I'd been carrying around began to vibrate like noise through my body. I can't explain it. These two amateurs playing sloppy chords was the scariest thing I'd ever heard. I backed out of the kitchen and into a hallway off the main room. They never looked up. A trio of girls, NYU students or wannabes, were high-stepping down the hall, banging pots and pans with wooden sticks. An old lady in a cocktail dress grabbed me by the wrists, forcing me to dance with her. Which way do you see it? Infinitely expanding? Or someday collapsing back from a lack of force, just to become another super black hole to explode and start again? What? The universe. The universe. We're all tracing steps of this dance. We just don't know which one. Infinitely expanding, one of the girls said with tears in her eyes. I just know it. I saw an open door and stairs leading down at the end of the hall. I broke the old woman's grasp and dashed down the stairs. Batik tapestries covered crumbling brick walls. Brown water stains blended into the crude diagrams of the solar system, drawn in black magic marker over the batik's yellow and orange designs. Light filtered in through the dirty cellar windows onto the 40-plus musicians sitting on the folding chairs, playing their hearts out. Jack was there, crammed in between Roger and a trumpet player, strumming his old ovation with the absent look in his eye I knew so well. The look that told me he'd been struggling to catch the groove and had finally locked in. His shaggy hair was a bit longer and his boyish face covered in stubble, but it was him all right. I loved him like a brother. And musical moments like the one I knew he was having now, fleeting glimpses of gentle, true spirit, he had once said, were what we lived for. And yet I had come to bring him away. A heavy reek of sweat and old guitar strings, spit, and valve lubricant oil hung in the air like ozone. I could feel in my bones, as sure as the ringing when Jack and I locked pitch while harmonizing, that something was brewing here. Something was being birthed in the music. I wanted to join in, get behind a piano, and add the fat, syncopated chords that the song was just crying out for. They belonged with Jack's guitar part, which, along with the drum and bass, was weaving a basket, tightly wrapping around the snaking cadences blaring from the mad cacophony of horns. Then the player next to Jack trembled and dropped his horn. I saw the whites of his rolled up eyes as he slumped forward. In the seat behind him sat a sax player, dead and rotting, his horn still hanging around his neck. Whatever it was that I had heard and the music was gone, I dashed across the room. Song or no song, I was getting Jack out of here now. I pictured my hand closing around Jack's wrist. I pictured myself yanking him out of that chair, pulling him across the room, up the stairs, and out of this mad place. But I didn't actually do any of these things. I couldn't move. The music went on. Dust circled like planetary rings. Jack was locked in the groove. The cadences and circling phrases deepened, widened. In my mind's eye, I pictured two serpents entwined in the double helix shape of infinity. The song was calling out for a piano part to bridge all these parts together. Noah, soul, join us, Roger said, his voice pitched to carry over the music. Your spirit is in this place. There was an old piano against the wall. I could sit there for a moment, play a few chords just to see what they sounded like, and then I can do whatever it was I had come to do. I sat at the bench and stretched my hands across the keys, let them hover there, waiting to catch the downbeat to come in. My hands tingled like they'd been asleep and were now waking up. I thought of Noah, soul, asleep at this very piano, groggily waking up to the jamming refrains of his beloved band. My hands were on the keys. A big fat chord, my thumbs grabbing the black keys, augmenting the seconds, filled out the tones with a slight dissonance that rang over the drums. The band had cut to just the percussion, the bass, and me. Then Roger and Jack came back in, trading a fast trill that reminded me of Sacred Spiral. It was powerful, thrilling. It felt right. It felt like home. Jack smiled. Not at me, to himself, but I knew what he was feeling. I felt the same way. My hands moved up and down the keyboard. In my head, I was still watching Noah's soul, his hands moving with mine until I was unsure if he were following me or I following him. They were right about the song. There was power here, something real, something alive, and they were very, very close. To what? I didn't know. But I knew in my bones that there was still something missing. Noah's soul knew it too. My playing had brought them closer. I could feel it. I knew it as sure as I knew that rain would fall from the sky, as sure as the cicadas' summer symphonies would cease come fall. I was far too familiar with the maddening feeling of being so close. Was that why he brought me here? To search with them? Was that what I brought to the equation? They were ready for the next movement. I didn't know where it would lead us, but I wanted to know, so I played on. The band came back in hard. Roger and the other sax players stood in their seats, swaying and bopping like in the video. The construction workers had come in from the kitchen. They were pounding on their guitars like drums. The girls from the hallways danced with the conga players. The old woman had some weird 3-string instrument in her grasp. After a few more measures, half the band was on its feet, marching around the room in interweaving orbits. I stayed at the piano. I couldn't see Jack anymore. I craned my neck, and I saw a trail of musicians marching up the stairs. The dead guy was on the floor in front of his chair. We flung the song outward with all of our intent, and in that instant, I knew what the crying girl had meant. The universe was either going to infinitely expand into the blackness of the void in an eternal wave of creation, or when we stopped, it would finally collapse back onto itself. Which one would it be? I didn't know. No one knew, but the song was hot on the trail. I kept playing. I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, The last of the musicians were disappearing up the stairs. My cadences slowed. I rang out fat chords, and with each of them, I thought of something true. My first love, my parents, my brother, my newborn niece, Jack, the girl from the music store. These things were true. These things were expanding, racing into the future. I kept playing, letting each chord ring out until it was no more, then replaced it with another. Noah's soul watched. Then he too was gone, and I was left with the fading sustain of my last chord and the settling dust in the last of the sunlight. When I stopped, I was alone with a dead guy in an abandoned building. I felt I had done something, but wasn't sure what. Some decision had been made, but I wasn't sure what, or even what all the choices had been. The next night, I received a call from Jack. "I'm going to Jupiter," he said. "I want you to come." I just listened, didn't say a thing. He knew my answer was no. "I'm going to be okay," he said. "Maybe after Jupiter it will be a new galaxy." "Why don't you just stop by before you go?" I asked. "I can't, dude. That's why I'm calling. Got to go." And that was the last I ever heard from him. The world didn't end, obviously. I wouldn't be writing this. Part of me hoped Jack would turn up a few months later, living with his sister in North Carolina, with some fling of the month in Jersey City or Amsterdam, all of which had happened before. It's been 6 years. I don't think I'll ever see him again. I finished the CD. It's cool. Not what I envisioned, so be it. I think of Noah Soul's song all the time. I hear it in everything, everywhere. In the dark of night, when Jupiter is shining, and especially on late August afternoons, when the cicadas are singing, and I go into the basement to continue my endless tinkering on that old guitar I never got to give to Jack. And that's the end of that story.
Awesome, great reading. You say you read that one a lot?
When I have a chance to read a full story, I pick that story because quite frankly, it just fits into the often the time. It's a relatively short story, so it fits. Sometimes you get 15 to 20 minutes only to read, and a lot of my stories are much longer than that. So it's one of the stories that I think will fit into a reading, and I think the intent of the story can be delivered in a reading, because sometimes I feel the challenge of when you're delivering a strange tale, a lot of it goes on resonance or the nighttime logic of it, and that just doesn't come across in bits and pieces sometimes. So I like that one because I feel like whatever reason, I feel like it works in chunks and it works in limited time.
Yeah. Now, your writing, especially when you go into reading a collection by Daneil Braum, the stories are almost always eclectic in genre. Yet you're typically classified as a horror slash weird fiction writer. Does that bother you at all?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, it's probably a source of comfort or confidence. When I first started writing, I thought I was writing, or at least I wanted to write. Thought it was science fiction or fantasy, and really wasn't getting much traction there in terms of publications. A few, and this is where I want to thank Cemetery Dance and Richard Chismar for putting me on a path, at least of joining a larger community, or joining, giving me a place for where my fiction might fit in to the larger world and lineage of fiction. One, Cemetery Dance started acquiring my stories for Cemetery Dance magazine, and they were like, okay, this is horror. And I'm like, I honestly didn't think of myself as horror. And then more so when Cemetery Dance ebooks, the old ebooks editor, Norman Prentice, who I have a lot of gratitude for. When he acquired the collection, when he asked me to do it, he really helped me learn about quiet horror and weird tales and strange fiction, and where start thinking about where this kind of fiction might fit in, which is, I think it's important when you're putting it out there in the world and trying to get people to find it. Not important, or not as important, potentially damaging, when you're in that space of creation. I think you just want to be alone with your own ideas, but when you're out there trying to share it with people, I think it helps to be able to put the book on the right shelf, or at
Yeah.
least a shelf.
Yeah, for sure. The horror community has really embraced you, I've noticed. But then again, a lot of your work does sort of go into that darker territory.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel grateful. I do feel grateful to be embraced by horror. That horror is such a wide umbrella that it can fit, authors like Aikman, or authors like Bradbury, or even interstitial authors like Kelly Link. It's wide enough, but then there also is a lineage and a tradition of quiet horror, of weird fiction, of strange tales, that my fiction bears resemblance to, or enough, for someone to say, "Oh, okay, it's not like this; it's like this," to help find an audience, or help match a reader to a book.
Yeah. Now, in this reissue of the Night Marchers, you added story notes, and I really love story notes. I'm 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 a sucker for them. And you mentioned some of the dates for when some of these stories were written, and I was surprised, honestly. Like, we're talking like 2006, 2007, and I was just wondering, how far along were you in your writing journey way back in 2006 and seven?
I was at a crossroads at that point. So right at that point, 2006, which was the year I wrote Music of the Spheres, at the very end of 2006, I was on my way to Brisbane, Australia, to take a writing workshop. I had taken a Clarion writing workshop years before, and I was going to take the Clarion writing workshop in Australia. And yeah, so I was at a point where I knew what I liked, and I knew what I wanted in fiction, but I had no, all the writers that I love now and I learned from and I've been educating myself, I just had no idea of the wide world out there. I just knew that, like, okay, this is the kind of story I want and I want to do, but so I was far along in my own voice, but I just don't think I wasn't confident in knowing if this was a thing that would be marketable or would be interesting to anyone other than myself yet. I would say that's where I was at 2006, 2007.
Very cool. Now, your first collection, it was published in, I believe, 2016, and it's been reissued this year. And I'm wondering, how did you and Cemetery Dance come to reissue the Night Marchers?
Yeah, so this is a great place to thank the original editor of the book, Norman Prentice. I mentioned his name before. He and Richard Chismar had acquired some of the stories for Cemetery Dance magazine, and he had acquired the book for the Cemetery Dance ebooks line. And the original intent was to originally do the book in print and an ebook, but it just wasn't in the cards at that point, for the publishing schedule and the resources at Cemetery Dance at the time. I published the trade edition with another publisher, and the rights came back to me. And at that point, the new division of Cemetery Dance ebooks and trade paperback division, which is headed by Kevin Lucia, who I have a lot of gratitude for. I asked him. We talked about printing and reprinting some of my work, and that's how it came to be. Kevin Lucia, I think he's a name. I think a lot of people know Kevin, but I think I think you can hear a lot more about him. I think he's quietly, or not so quietly, slowly, definitely surely. He's doing great work with the Cemetery Dance ebooks and trade paperback division, in that he's presenting a wide picture of the genre, all sorts of corners of the horror genre, from more traditional to maybe more splatter, to more Stephen King like, and to even more quiet type stuff like myself are being put out there. And I'm really happy to be a small part of that bigger picture of horror as is being put out there by Cemetery Dance. So I think that touched on the question.
It did. Now, I've talked to you about this before when we were talking about your most recent collection, Underworld Dreams.
Yeah.
And I said that I described your writing as having a dreamlike quality. And while doing research for this book, The Night Marchers, I was reading the reviews on, I think it was Amazon. And I feel justified because there's one or two people who say the same thing. These stories, they have that same, dreamlike quality. And I'm wondering if finding that dreamlike quality is intended or just a happy result. And one great example of this is The Moon and the Mesa. It's one of my favorite stories by you, and it has that dreamlike quality so strong.
Wow. Can I pick multiple choice, all the above? Can I pick? I think it's a happy result, and I think it is intended. And the reason why I say think is that I think when I first started writing out, I think it was more of a happy result. It was more instinctual, and as I grew as a writer and started thinking about horror and started thinking about writing, I started to look at what I was doing and look at other writers from a more conscious way. So I think now I'm writing more consciously or more controlled, while still tapping into that instinctual part of what I want to deliver in a story. So it's a hard question to answer, because what I want to deliver in a story is feeling, whether it's that dreamlike feeling. And I refer to it as nighttime logic. I didn't make up that term. It's a term that's been used by other great writers before me. But it's that part of the story that it's that feeling of unease. It's that feeling. It's that dream logic feeling. It's that feeling of the story that you're feeling with your gut, but not in your mind. It's like you're scared, you're uneasy, you're confused, but you don't know why. It's not like there's a vampire, I know to be scared. It's more like I don't understand what's happening.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's an inartful way of putting it. So I will say both to that question.
Awesome. As I said, The Moon and the Mesa is one of my favorites. So is Music of the Spheres. But you chose to read that, and I wanted then to go with The Moon and the Mesa. So up next is The Moon and the Mesa. So if you want to tell us a little bit about this story,
Yeah.
and I'll let you go with it.
Yeah. So Jason and I were when we were thinking about what we could do for the event, we were toying with the idea of reading just a couple of different bits from different stories. So we were like, all right, I'll pick one and you'll pick one, and we'll kind of have the wild card that way. So I had landed on two stories that I wanted to read from. I hadn't had the third one yet, and when I told Jason, he was happy because we both overlapped on Music of the Spheres, and then he wanted to hear from Moon and the Mesa, and I was immediately like, oh, that's great. I was really glad he picked that story. Because while I've read it before, it's one I might not have initially thought of, because I think of it as a tough story in a couple of different ways. One, it's a tough story because it's unorthodox in a couple of ways. It has an unorthodox structure. It's unorthodox in the way it uses time. in the story, I'm not going to read the whole story. I'm just going to read one section of it. But there are several different scenes in the past and in the present running concurrently. Sometimes we see that a lot in television or in cinema, more so than in fiction, or not really in short fiction. So these different scenes or different stories are running at the same time. And hopefully you get the sense that the outcome of the past is going to converge or have bearing on the consequences of what's happening in the present scene. And what's happening in the present scene is that there's the main character and some people who are going to a bar, and they're deciding whether they're going to kill someone or not. And these people are descendants, children or grandchildren of Holocaust survivors. And the story deals, while not straight on, it deals with the intense notions and emotions that come with that state of being. There's feelings of retribution, generational trauma, mercy. So the absurd is, I'm going to read, we're not going to see those structures or the use of time. While they're in the bar, the main character is telling the other character about something that happened in the desert. And I'm going to find it. And then I'm going to read from the Moon and the Mesa. My arm is red and mottled with little bumps from so much sweating. The heat of the day is gone with the sun, vanished with the warm wind sweeping from the mountains into the valley, a wake-up call to the sleeping creatures of the night. The air is alive with bats. Coyotes prowl on distant mesa tops. I don't see them, but I sense them waiting for the rising moon, and I want to hear one howl like in the movies. Dworkin taunts me as I leave to hike to the mesa. Then he gets serious. I need this time, thanks. But come back later. I'd love a photo or two. The moon rises over the mesa, drenching the night in a white glow. The cacti, the scrub, a steer skull with broken horns, a shell of a pickup truck half buried in red sand. They all take on a new starkness and poignancy. Being here, I feel like I am like them, a survivor, even if I've done nothing else to earn it besides being born. This close, the mesa is huge, a monolithic fist rising from the earth. It dwarfs me and the sea of cactus and all the creatures who run the course of their lives at its feet. With the oppressive heat gone, the desert is alive with life. Things can flourish in the night. Movement is everywhere. Kangaroo rats scurry to and from their holes. Coyote disappear among the cactus, and I hear them yipping and snarling somewhere else nearby. Things rustle in the scrub, lizards and snakes. I try to watch where I step. A shiny black scorpion crosses my path, with a lizard twice its size impaled on its stinger tail. Without the noise of the city, without my ringing phone and the bombardment of ideas from billboards and TV, I notice that the world is a quiet place. I sense their absence. The open road has opened someplace in my mind. Dworkin's chords echo off the mesa. I wonder if I could ever convince Jamie to come here with me. I wonder what my grandmother would have looked like had she lived till a ripe old age. Would my family still be in Europe if it weren't for the war? If so, what would have become of me? Someone is sitting on a big rock at the foot of the mesa. I close the distance and realize it is a thick cactus, its spiky arms emulating a ragdoll human shape in the shadows and moonglow. Then I see her, the German girl. She's on a plateau just up the slope. She's wearing the same white shirt and shorts, not a speck of red dust anywhere. Her legs are crossed and she's leaning back on her arms. She's as motionless as the cactus. I feel myself get excited. Then I stumble. My vision wavers and threatens to go black. I should have brought more water. I climb the slope and park myself next to her on the rock. With the change of vantage, I can see the maze of cactus and rock, the nighttime city. The moon glow has smoothed over her scar. The tiny lines around her eyes are gone. I want to hear her talk, hear her accent. What are you thinking? I say to get her talking. She shakes her head, no, and places her finger over her lips. The movement is meticulous and as fluid as an ant cleaning its mandibles. Her breasts are fuller than I remembered this afternoon, her legs longer, smoother. There's not a drop of sand on her. The sense of proximity to primal oldness fills me. And like that, I realize she's not the German girl. I try to scoot away, but I'm frozen. It looks just like her, whatever the fuck it is. It's pretty. Blonde haired head slowly turns fluidly, not a drop of movement from the rest of her. Am I talking to myself? Am I like my grandmother? Mad and talking to things no one else can see. Green numbers appear on her moon white skin. The arm becomes Jamie's, and now it is Jamie sitting next to me. She's caressing her gun as if it were a lover's hand. No, you're not crazy, the Jamie thing says. What's crazy about wanting to make them suffer? Don't you want to kill them all? Dworkin's chords erupt into an obscene, grinding riff. The moon is just above the mesa top, a perfect round companion to its unyielding, square-topped form. Now I see my grandmother. The smell of her is too real. Mothballs and bleach and stale fish and sweat and drool. I'm tired of this, I say. I want to stop fighting. So stop, it says. It doesn't sound like my grandmother at all. It sounds like some bird from the zoo that has learned how to talk. Her mouth is black, and inside something glows like a far away star. Thorny spines poke from her flesh. Her skin shines like a scorpion's in the moonlight. She takes my hand. Her grip is stronger than I expect. She pulls me to her kiss and tastes bitter like fried cactus. My heart races, and I think I'm going to be swallowed and die. My bones left to be covered by the sand, but I can't stop kissing it. And as I do, I'm filled with the oddest notion that a scorpion isn't evil. It just is. It stings and kills because it is its nature. I wonder if what Jamie does is her nature, and if what she wants me to do, and why I have come here tonight, is mine. No, it's just a justification. It's all wrong. Nothing changes that. Then I remember Mr. Yeeskill, and I break away. I'm here with Mr. Yeeskill, I say. I have his permission. It smiles. Then I am sitting alone, just the thorny ragdoll cactus next to me. I look away, and I see a woman climbing the slope. The German girl. She's in cut-off jeans and a purple Mexican poncho. Here with who? The German girl says, climbing up the rocks. Yeeskill knew it would boil down to her and me. This is why I'm here. Alone. I feel like I am the scorpion now. But I get the sense I'm still being watched by the cactus thing, the looming mass of the mesa, its eyes. Guess you've been waiting long? You look like you need a fuck even more than me. I start to ramble. She tells me to shut up. She takes my hand. Hers is solid, but surprisingly tender. Her skin slightly damp with sweat, welcomingly cool on my burnt skin. Somehow I know whatever it is that is watching cares about nothing that has or will happen here. The drama of my life, meaningless as another lizard succumbing to a poison sting. I sing along with Dworkin's chords in the distance. Your friend sucks, she says. A mechanical crackle disrupts the riff, and one final guitar chord rings out and fades into the canopy of sound that is the desert night. An owl lifts silently from its perch on a cactus at the foot of the mesa, a squirming mouse in its talons. This is where Jamie would turn it around. This is where Jamie would take her down. This is where we kiss. I roll on top of her, press her shoulders into the ground. Her hands dig into my back. We shed our clothes, two more creatures of the desert, naked in the sand. Our sands drown in the crackles of Dworkin unplugging his guitars. So I'll stop that excerpt right there.
Awesome. It's funny that you read that scene because that's like my favorite scene. We didn't discuss what part you're going to read, but I just love that idea of being in the desert and suddenly reality starts to shift while somebody's playing the electric guitar under the moonlight. It's just so surreal and beautiful.
I guess it's one of those stories that I didn't think that was a music story, but there it is. The music is undeniably part of the story. Yet I thought was, going back to your first question, I thought it intended the thrust of the story to be something different, but the music is right there, playing a part.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Oh, I just want to remind everyone, I put in the questions or in the chat. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. And Josh did ask a question during your reading, and he says, do you feel that writing dark, weird fiction makes you weirder by focusing on those kind of things, or more normal by getting them out of your system?
I don't think those sort of things are weird. More normal. I'm not one of those writers who at least intentionally writes for catharsis. Although I did at the Scares That Cares convention, I did participate in a panel on that was really eye-opening and really well done. So it's something I think about. But at least it's not an intentional catharsis, and I'll say no. It doesn't make me feel weird. Weirder.
Fair enough. I want to mention you have the book with you. You're reading from the actual book, correct?
Yeah, this would be a good place. Let me hold it up if I may.
Yeah, because I want to go into that artwork.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that was the next thing I wanted to say.
The artwork is absolutely stunning. It's by an artist named Dan Sauer. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Dan. Forgive me, Dan. I've never said his name out loud, and one of my X-Men superpowers is the power of mispronunciation. So I wouldn't.
Mine too.
I wouldn't trust. So don't trust us, but do trust Dan Sauer, because look at this cover. First of all, it's just a gorgeous cover, and he did such a great job. I'll let you ask your question, but I do hope for the opportunity to talk about what a great experience it was working with Dan and Kevin on this book.
My question was just simply, what was your first reaction when you saw the finished cover? It must have been like, oh my God! Like,
I'm glad you asked that question, because it was perfect. I'll back it up a little bit, of course. So first of all, it was great that it was such a great experience that I had the opportunity to submit. Kevin Lucia asked me, hey, who might work? Who would you want to work on this book? And I gave him one name. I said, if you can possibly work it out, I've been dying to work with Dan. Dan, it first came to my attention. He publishes, or at least is the head. Forgive me if I'm getting this wrong. It's the zine, The Audient Void, and he also has his own publishing company, Jack and Apes Press, and Dan Sauer Design. So I've been familiar with his work, and I really liked it. So we got the green light. We got the opportunity to work together. And when it came time to work, Dan was like, hey, yeah, if you have any ideas, just run past me. And of course, being a writer, I am not a graphic designer. God only knows what I sent to Dan. Like I shudder. Like he probably still has those things, but it's a testament to how talented. Like I'm like, hey, is that enough? I could give you 20 more pages. And he was like, no, that's probably fine. So I probably sent him all these grandiose ideas, but he just extracted. He knew what I wanted without me being able to say it. Like he read the stories, he read the book, he read my ideas, and he just took a little element of each one. He took that jaguar, he took the lionfish, he took the jellyfish, he took the colors, he even has the planet Jupiter on the back, and he made this composite design. And more than doing this composite design, he knew without me even telling him two of my favorite authors, Lucia Shepard and Tanith Lee. I always mention them unintentionally or intentionally in always. If you've ever listened to me talk, I can't not talk about them.
Robert Aikman too.
Yeah, Robert Aikman too. I think Tanith and Lucius are maybe eking them out a little bit, but the design also mirrors a classic Arkham House cover design of one of Lucia Shepard's collections, and the layout and coloring and font choice is just a subtle nod to the old DAW paperbacks of Tanith Lee. So he just did astounding work. And when he emailed to me, he wasn't sure what I was going to think, or he wasn't sure of it himself. And the email comes through, and he was just like, it's okay if you don't like it, or what do you think? What's your comments? And I was just like, it's perfect. Don't change a thing.
Don't touch it.
Yeah, I was like, please be real. Pinch myself. Please let this be the cover. Please let it was just perfection. Not a thing, not a stitch was changed. It was just, flawless victory, perfection. And I'm so grateful, for the opportunity to be able to, work with him. And I'm so grateful for the cover because, like everyone, it's the perfect calling card for the book because, it's a work of art by itself. Dan really put, he really created a work of art. He really put himself into it. And everywhere I go, whoever sees it, it's always like, great cover. And right, the old cliche, we don't judge a book by its cover, but we do judge a book by its cover, I mean? And book covers are super cool things for those of us who love books. And I hope my enthusiasm is overpouring, and to say thank you to him and to Kevin for this cover. So
yes, it's absolutely wonderful. I just want to remind everyone that this is you have 4 collections out. Am I correct on that?
3 full collections. This one, The Night Marchers. The second one is The Wish Mechanics, Stories of the Strange and Fantastic, Underworld Dreams, and a mini collection, Yeti Tiger Dragon from Dim Shores Press. So yes, maybe 3. Yeah, you've got one there.
But I got this one here. I did order Night Marchers, but it didn't come in, of course, in time. But this one is really great too.
Thank you.
And so people, I'm just going to give you a little plug here. Underworld Dreams by Daneil Braum. It's awesome.
Yeah, shout out to Steve Berman at Leth Press.
Leth Press.
Yeah, they do a great job. Steven Anderson, I believe, is the cover artist. I'm fortunate to work with great cover artists. Love that cover too. Underworld Dreams, great cover. Thank you so much.
All right, so before I continue, I've few more questions before we get to the next reading. I just want to know if you want to take a break at all, or are we good?
I'm good to go. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
All right. So I wanted to ask you about the characters that you write, because I noticed that a lot of your characters are more self-reflective than a lot of other books that I read. And so I was wondering what goes into creating your characters.
I think my creative process is often setting centric. And the setting comes first, and the characters, it's not exclusive, but often I find myself the characters coming out of extensions from the setting. And what I mean by that is where the muse strikes me, or where that the thing you can't decide, where I get inspired is by a setting. And yeah, I guess this is going to be a great read in, or a great lead in to the last story that we're going to hear from, which is called Jellyfish Moon. And so, for example, in that story, it was rare in that it's a fictional setting, and I had that setting first. So often I'll either write about a real setting or a fictional setting, and then I will think about the conflicts that are present in that setting and how to embody them in dramatic structure. And that's where I start to try on characters, and the characters come from that, which I'm told is different, perhaps, but that's that's most of like I'm not advocating. I think for people who write out there, I think you should write. You should have a toolbox. I love to listen and hear how different people do it, and try things on for size, and ultimately, you got to write the way you write.
Actually, I can sympathize. I've started and finished short stories that had a setting before the characters came.
Yeah.
Like, or at least a situation, and then the characters come and they become real people.
Yeah. And then as it comes along, right? Like, there's a lot of these writing cliches that do become true. Like, when they become real people. Yeah. Like, if you really dwell in them or are present in them, like they will surprise you, or being true to the character might be different than what we originally wanted from the story.
Yeah. And in your story notes, you said that you would write about the desert any chance that you got, but I noticed that you write a lot about the ocean, and I was wondering, what is it about those two extremes that draw you?
I have no idea. I wish I could insert something poignant and opposite and thing there, but
Well,
thank you, Jason. You see, because the desert's temperature being, right, I wish I could say something mystical or cool enough, except I just want to say, like, I just love them both. They're just such cool places, and I'm inspired when I'm at both of those places, and inspired both to the point of being there and wanting to be present and be in the moment, but also inspired with, like, the aftermath of that. Like, when I'm back in my life, or I'm back away from those places, those are the places or the details that do haunt me. And that's how a story starts, of just like a little detail that will stay with me and just start to become a story.
I found in a lot of your writing, not everything, of course, but some of it, there's this sense of longing that the characters have, and I found this really strong in Sans, how Sans longs for Marika in Jellyfish Moon. I mean, that's I think the most extreme example I can think of, but in the majority of your characters have this sense of longing, even if they're not longing for something specific.
Yeah, in the case, I think we're going to see a little bit of this, or maybe it's great to talk about it because maybe it won't be in the episode I read. There's a character in Jellyfish Moon. His name is San, and his wife. He is a native to this fictional island, which bears resemblance to a lot of places that I know in this world. And as what happens in these places, sometimes people who are native there marry an outsider from a different country, from a different world, be it. And San and Marika were married, and so now I'm thinking, in the story they don't. I don't believe they have a child together, but that sense just reminded me of, it's a dynamic that I'd seen a lot in the real world, of something similar to what I hope to capture between San and Marika. In the story Jellyfish Moon, that longing and that relationship, I hopefully spun it into a strange tale. I didn't know it was a strange tale at the time, but there's the chance that something about that relationship, or at least something about Marika, is supernatural. Or maybe it's just, or you can easily interpret it and be like, no, this is a product of psychology, of intensity, of emotion.
Hmm. I love that story too. And this is the next story you're going to be reading for us.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So this is Jellyfish Moon. I think I think we've introduced it pretty well. I'm going to read two two small bits. One, I'm going to read just like a paragraph or two from the beginning of the story, which introduces this island, and then it introduces the island in a festival, and then I'm going to read a second small part, which is what happens at this festival, or something that happens. So this is Jellyfish Moon. Twin crescent beaches of fine white sand fanned out from the rocky tide pools at the foot of the steep cliff, a calm and shallow bay between them. Two larger-than-life figures, hewn from the rock, flanked a wide cave entrance leading into the heart of the island. The seated men had the elongated heads of saltwater crocs and were said to be servants of Harat, the guardian spirit of the small fishing community turned exclusive tourist haven. Where the beaches thinned and arced together, forming the narrow mouth of the bay, San paddled his dugout full of tackle and wire to repair the nets. Bare-chested and barefoot, his dark skin glistened with salty water. The bay was closed off from the ocean with nets, just as it had been every time this year for generations. San's father and his father before him had been a net diver. With the growing tourist industry came stronger nets and plastic buoys, but the job was always the same. Check the nets and keep the bay free of crocs for the Jellyfish Moon. San paddled close to the line of buoys, marking where the nets disappeared beneath the water. Every paddler was on the water, patrolling for crocs. San heard his brother-in-law Charlie's deep chuckle. Of course he was happy. The sun was shining, all was cool and calm, and he came home every night to his wife and children. San, you take your head out of the sky and dive down to those nets, his sister Tal called from a cluster of paddlers. Her voice surprised him. She should be preparing for the festival, but she loved to wrestle the crocs out of the bay with her husband Charlie and the boys. I checked them twice already today, he said. Then check them again. Got him, Charlie cried. His rope noose was taut from the struggling of a snared croc below. Tal deftly turned her boat to go help. And when you are done, Marika is here, Tal called over her shoulder, and as she paddled away. Charlie says one of the boys took her bags up to Ruby Shores. San's arms went weak upon hearing her name. It was the worst time. He had so much to do before the dark of the moon. So that's introducing the story. San and Marika is back before this festival. And I've never read this before, and that was part of the reason I wanted to read it tonight. So we're going to pick up in the thick of it, in the thick of the festival. San wanted to go back to his place and wash off the salt of the day and get some needed sleep, but he had to see Marika. He couldn't let her go without seeing her one more time. Then he would know what was right. He tied his dugout to the dock and walked through the crowd to the Ruby Shores. Oops, I want to make sure I'm in the right spot. Yeah, I'm in the right spot. The pavilion was almost deserted. Most of the vendors had taken their carts and wares down to the beach. He noticed Mr. and Mrs. Henderson pushing their carts away. They were talking to a tall, pretty lady in a suit, holding a microphone, who was followed around by a man shouldering a big camera. Big Raj's son was working security at the hotel gate. I'm here to see my wife. She ain't here. Let me in. I'm telling you, she's on the top floor. I'm telling you, she's at the festival. Left a half hour ago. The sun was low in the sky. He'd have to hurry and find her before the crowds and darkness made it an impossible task. Rushing to the beach, Sand edged his way through rich families, well manicured couples holding hands, and long haired, wide eyed young people adorned in croc tooth jewelry and bright colors that were supposed to mimic that of the nighttime jellies. The smell of grilling fish, roasting pineapple, and nuts made his stomach rumble, but he kept on looking for a glimpse of Marika. He asked the cake man selling fruit brownies, Big Raj working his grill. He stopped to buy a pack of Marika's favorite cigarettes at the Henderson stand. Mr. and Mrs. Henderson had not seen her, though Mr. Henderson smiled and clicked a mock photo of him with his hands. Sweaty and exhausted, Sand patrolled the 2 strips of beach. He thought of the smiling face of the croc beneath the water and glanced up to the blindfolded crocmen's statues. A female form moved in the shadows of the cave mouth. A slender arm rested on the leg of one of the crocmen. Marika? She couldn't be in the temple. The thought was so absurd. It was irreverent. Exactly the sort of thing Marika would want to do. It was what she wanted to do last year. The last bit of the sun sank below the waves, and a hush spread over the beaches. Deep drums sounded from the trees. Sparks of orange flickered through the bay, full of jellies, mimicking the departed sun as the procession of elders appeared at the tree line. Marchers wearing big papier-mâché croc heads of bright orange, yellow, and purple stepped in time. Sand pushed his way through the crowd. The pungent smell of festival incense wafted above the aromas of cooking food. Flag bearers carried poles trailing green, blue, and red streamers. Sand knew one of them was tall. As if in response, the jellies in the bay ignited in a burst of color. Vibrant greens and oranges radiated through the bay like a million submerged fireflies. Bursts of primary reds and yellows and blues spontaneously appeared to the cheers of delight from the crowd. New Agers edged closer to the shore, anxious for the blessing to be done and to be the first into the supposedly restorative waters. Sand wished he were watching with Marika. The waves of color were hypnotizing, and it occurred to him that he had never seen it from this vantage. He raced to the pavilion and stole away, unnoticed, through the door leading into the heart of the temple. The murmur of the crowd was muted inside the dim passage. The lights leading into the temple chamber were out. He hurried, his hand on the rusty rail, expecting to come upon Marika, sitting a few feet from the mouth of the cave, smoking a clove, taking solitary delight in her privileged view of the bay. He would quietly slither up behind her and snake his arms around her. The thrashing rustle of leather on stone met him. Guttural growls and heavy breathing echoed in the room. It was coming from the center, the altar. Marika? He called out and squinted, his eyes not yet adjusted to the faint light reaching in from the mouth. He struck a match. In the sulfur glow, he made out a monstrous form on the stone slab, a huge, ridged tail sprouting from the back of a man, thrashing side to side as he mounted someone on the altar. 2 slender female legs wrapped around his mottled back. The match went out. Was it Marika and one of the costumed men? The moans intensified. He lit another match. The woman had mounted the croc man. Sand stepped forward to see better, but he didn't want to. As his match sputtered, he saw Marika's face. Her eyes met his, and she smiled, her mouth full of huge, jagged crocodile teeth. An animal roar filled the darkness and mixed with Marika's cries, no longer of passion, but of rage. Sand heard the awful sound of fists connecting with flesh like a butcher tenderizing a fish. The croc man roared in pain. He didn't know what kind of gods the outsiders had, but he hoped Harat was strong enough to wrestle with them and prevail. San ran to the altar and fumbled for another match. He stumbled, dropping matches, screaming Marika's name. He wasn't sure if he should be recruiting her or he wasn't sure if he should be rescuing her or stopping her. The moaning stopped and the rustle of clothing and footsteps replaced it. Outside, the muted cries of delight gave way to a horrendous, unified scream. Sand struck another match. The figures on the altar were gone. The room was empty. Was he feverish from lack of sleep? He inspected the altar. Dark blue fluid, like crocodile blood, stained it. He ran to the cave mouth and pushed through the nets and streamers. The New Agers who had wandered into the bay were frantically pushing each other over to get out. The entire bay was alight with rapid patterns of red and fiery oranges, the brightest he had ever seen. 3 dark shapes weaved through the jellies. Crocs. Ripples of dark violet and blue jellies in their wake. White froth splashed at the net line. Hundreds of others were pushing to get in. They breached the waves as if some invisible signal had them frenzied. Then San saw the cloud of red. Blood. Someone had been bit. He knew he should run down and help, but he had to find Marika. The apparitions in the temple had to have been a delusion, but the blood, the ridges on the Crocman's back were so real. Seeing Marika, he would know. The town bells were ringing. The fire alarm was blaring. He could hear the roar of panic from the bay. He ran for the hotel. The gate to Ruby Shores was open and unattended. Sand darted in, dashed through the lobby, and into the elevator before the lone woman staffing the desk could stop him. The elevator rose slowly. Sand jabbed at the 10th floor button over and over. The doors slid open with a hiss. A teenage boy in a Ruby Shores uniform, someone's son that he knew but whose name his frenzied mind couldn't remember, sat in the plush sofa playing solitaire on the coffee table. He looked pleased to see Sand. "Finally, you came," he said. "Where is she?" Easy, she ain't here." "I checked the festival. She's not down there either." "Don't kill the messenger, man." He shoved a thick stack of documents next to the playing cards towards him. "She left this for me to hand to you and no one else." Sand ruffled through the papers. There was a passport with his name and picture inside, travel papers, a valid visa, a plane ticket with all exit fees paid for. Everything was paid for. These items were so hard for a man like himself to obtain. He'd wished for them so often when Marika had left last year. The memory of the yearning was like the touch of an old friend. He tore open the envelope beneath. It was full of US $100 bills. "Don't worry, it's all there," the kid said. "She paid me well." I'll stop at that point. Thank you.
All right. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for reading. I really enjoyed that story. It kind of reminded me a little bit of your novella, The Serpent's Shadow.
Oh, thank you.
So I really enjoyed that novella.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm glad you mentioned it. That was released as an ebook by Cemetery Dance, and they are releasing it in trade paperback format come this September. So I'm really excited that the novella will be reaching some more people. So I'm really happy about that. But yeah, I see what you're saying. And the Serpent Shadow, without giving too much away, it's about the spirit of a place, and in Jellyfish Moon is a similar idea happening about, a tug and war about what is a place going to be. Is it going to be the past? Is it going to be the future? Is it going to be the old? Or is it the new? Traditions versus progress, without judging either way. Sometimes these are natural ebbs and flows of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Another one thing I really enjoyed, I mentioned it before, is that you added the story notes at the end. Not too many authors who release collections do this. So I was wondering why you decided to do this in the reissue.
I thought it was a good, I thought it was a good opportunity. I have to credit Steve Berman from Lev Press, who, when we were doing Underworld Dreams, who I really credit to doing a great job editing that book and choosing what that book was going to come. And Steve was really, really forward about that people like story notes, and that story notes belonged in Underworld Dreams. And thanks to Steve, I learned that people like story notes. I sort of cringe at story notes. I'm like this has got to be so uninteresting. Not, I mean, I'll talk about stories, my stories and stories till the cows come home, but I guess there's part of me that always feels like no one's going to be interested in this. So I took the opportunity to do the story notes for the Night Marchers, to tell the story of my awareness of strange tales in the Aikman point of view. So some of this in the beginning, where I mentioned earlier, I was writing more on instinct, and just at the very end, maybe the last story or two in that book was written after a very pivotal experience for me, which was attending a panel at a World Fantasy Convention. Wasn't hosted by Peter Straub, but there was something on that panel that Peter Straub said that really made lights go off on me, and I wrote about that in the book. So the story notes are a chronicle of my understanding of A Strange Tale, and it culminates in the final part of the book is an essay about strange tales that I wrote in 2015 or 2016 as the book came out, talking about Aikman's Strange Tales and A Strange Tale. So
Very good. So I want to mention that I see that Rebecca Rowland is in the audience here, and
hey, Rebecca.
And I just wanted to mention that before we go, and also before we go, if anyone has a question, now would be a great time to ask it, because we're at the very tail end here. But I wanted to mention that your short story, you have a short story in this anthology here, American Cannibal.
Yeah, a great book.
It was edited by Rebecca Rowland, and it's a fantastic anthology. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your story there? That's in there. What's the name of it? I can't remember.
The name of the story is Tiki Bar at the Edge of Forever.
Yes.
Which is a kind of riff, I guess. Rest in peace, the great Harlan Ellison, who is no longer with us, which is a sad thing. But I guess he can't sue me for riffing on City on the Edge of Forever. It's a riff on the Star Trek episode City on the Edge of Forever. The story has nothing to do with it, but the title does. I don't want to talk about that story because I want to talk, if I have a second, I want to talk about how great an anthology American Cannibal is, just from the great job Rebecca did in curating it, conceiving the idea, and recruiting such a wide range of really great authors that I'm really honored to be involved in. And it's a beautiful book. It's got a Lynn Hansen cover. It's out in hardcover. It's out in ebook. I just had some credits, so I just bought the audio book last night because I'm gonna listen to the stories I haven't listened to yet on audio. So it's a super cool project, and I do highly recommend it. I'm really excited that I got a chance to be involved in it. So glad that you got a copy of it, and glad that Rebecca's here as well.
Yeah, and what's your story about in it?
So the cool thing about this book is that it's all stories about cannibalism throughout American history, and each author had to pick a year or write a story in a year. And now I'm going to embarrass myself by forgetting. I think mine's 1987, so it's a very 1980s based story. And of course, I wrote a strange. I took the challenge to write a strange tale, and to have. I took it as a challenge. Like, wow, how can I still write a story acceptable to Rebecca and to the editor, and still have it embody that intentional ambiguity that I like to do. So, it's a story about American identity. One of the main characters is a Hawaiian American, and it's about his finding his place in these pretty weird American suburbs, and of course, to quote Jim Morrison, "There's a killer on the run," and there's a killer, a cannibal. So.
It was a lot of fun reading that.
Oh, I'm glad.
So I've noticed on Facebook, I saw a post anyway, that you were working on a novel. Is that true?
Yeah, it's again to the great Lev Press. It's Steve Berman of Lev Press acquired the novel. The novel is called Servant Servant of the Eighth Wind, and I'm about to turn in my final edits on that, so I should have some news about when that's going to come pretty soon. I guess it's worth mentioning the connection to the Night Marchers. Two stories that we didn't read tonight, Across the Darien Gap and Hurricane Sandrine. There are characters from those stories that do appear in the novel. And the settings and plots of those two stories are critical to the novel. So it's fun to mention that tonight when we're talking about the Night Marchers.
Yes, exactly. But I'm really looking forward to reading a longer piece by you. I mean, I read that novella, Serpent's Shadow, and that was a lot of fun. But I would like to see what you do with the novel form.
Oh,
Would this be your
you.
first novel, like full length novel?
Yeah, it would be. It would be the longest. I think right now, to this date, the Serpent Shadow is the longest published thing, which it falls right. The Serpent Shadow is like right a hair under 30,000 words. Like I think a story has to be the length that it's meant to be. So I don't focus on the length, except when you're on those borderlines. Like, so if you have a story that's 29.9, is it a novel or is it a novella? So,
Yeah.
right. And does that matter? I don't know. It matters if we're playing the game of putting things in boxes. So technically, the Serpent Shadow, it's a novella. Longest thing I've wrote. Servant of the Eighth Winds. That's twice and then some that, and that's going to be coming. Be able to announce that once I get that turned in to Lev Press, and we'll be hearing about that.
Awesome. Now, do you have anything coming out in the meantime that we can look forward to?
I do have a couple of things I want to mention, and if I have a sec, I just want to thank do some thank yous here. I want to thank Norman Prentice and Richard Chismar again. I want to thank Kevin Lucia and Dan Franklin, Blue Gillian over at Cemetery Dance, and the whole Cemetery Dance team. I think it was a great experience working with them. They did a great job. Everyone worked hard for a long time, and part of that is Dan Sauer, the great cover part of this team and effort, and made me really happy. And everyone did a great job. So I want to thank them, and I want to thank you, Jason, for supporting authors, for being so supportive of me. I want to thank everyone who's read the book and comes to these events, and to thank you to my colleagues who've supported me very generously as well. Victor Laval, Nicholas Kaufman, Sarah Langen, Dave Wellington, Lee Thomas, just to name a few. I have a lot of thank yous, but I want to just say a few of them. June 10th, I'll be at the Lovecraft Arts and Sciences Council in Providence, Rhode Island at the Arcade Asylum Reading Series. So we're going to do an in-person celebration for the Night Marchers. June 25th, the Thing in the Labyrinth Book Club. I'm going to be the book club of the month for that cool series. And September 15th, I believe it is, from Cemetery Dance, The Serpent Shadow is coming out. From Cemetery Dance. So I have some things on the horizon I'm very grateful for. Thank you for letting me mention that.
It sounds like you have a pretty exciting future coming, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Jason. It's been great.
All right, so I want to thank everyone for coming out and asking questions and commenting and listening to Daniel read his excerpts from his stories. I had an absolute blast. I can't thank you enough, Daniel, for asking me to do this. So you're,
Thank
as
you.
always, you have the free ticket to come on anytime you
Uh,
want. Just let me know.
what a blast. It was great. It was great spending time with you. As always, really great to talk to you, Jason. Thank you so much. I had a great time.
All right, that's the show for tonight. Thanks everyone again for coming out, and we will catch you next time.
Take care. Bye.